Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Do animals have souls? If so, will those souls be kept someplace to be returned back into their body on the Day of Judgment? Well, the answer to this question is yes. And I would like to bring to your attention the famous tafsir work of Imam al-Suyuti rahimahullah in his book Ad-Durr al-Manthur, which is his tafsir work. Besides Tafsir al-Jalalain, he has two tafsir works. One was his teacher, Tafsir al-Jalalain, and Ad-Durr al-Manthur, which is his individual work, in which he brings a narration from Ibn al-Mundar under the tafsir of Surah Al-Baqarah, under the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and the four birds. And Ibn al-Mundar narrates it from Hassan al-Basri rahimahullah, who is famous tabi'i, which is the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and the four birds, which is ayah number 260 of Surah Al-Baqarah. When Ibrahim alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Oh Allah, how will you bring the dead back to life?" And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him that, "Do you not believe?" He said, "Of course I believe. I just want to experience it. I want to see it. How will this happen? I believe that this will happen." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him to take four birds and train them. And then after he would train them, that they would come back on his sound, they should then be slaughtered and put back on different places from wherever they're called. And then they will come back to life exactly the way they were before they were slaughtered. So Hassan al-Basri rahimahullah says that those four birds, one of them was a rooster, another one was a peacock, another one was a crow, and the last one was a pigeon. So Ibrahim alayhi salam took care of them, fed them, trained them, whatever it is, and then after a few days or whatever time frame, he slaughtered them, and he basically put them in pieces and put them on four different places, four different mountains or four different directions, and then he called them. And Hassan al-Basri rahimahullah says that the wings started joining with wings and the bones started joining with bones, and the entire bird was prepared, and the bird came back to Ibrahim alayhi salam exactly the way it was before. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as he slaughtered, the soul left the body of the bird. And when Ibrahim alayhi salam called the bird, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the body to be put back together and the soul to return back into the body, and the birds came to Ibrahim alayhi salam. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ud'uhunna," you call them, "Ya'tinaka sa'ya," they will come to you flying or hastily, however they are. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala closes out ayah number 260 by saying, "Wa'lam," know that anna Allah azizun hakim, indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is almighty and all wise. So this is one story which reflect that animal was brought back to life after being dead, so the soul was put back into that animal. And then it was the same soul. That's why when Ibrahim alayhi salam called the bird came rushing to Ibrahim alayhi salam because it recognized Ibrahim alayhi salam. That's exactly the point here. If it was somebody as a different soul, would not have recognized. It was a different soul in the same body, would not react the same way. It was same soul and same body. There is another story in Surah Al-Baqarah, right before ayah 260. It is in ayah 259, a totally different story. Thousands of years after Ibrahim alayhi salam, or we don't know how many hundreds and thousands of years after Ibrahim alayhi salam, a story of a man whose name is not been mentioned in the Quran, but in the books of tafsir we find his name to be Uzair alayhi salam. He was traveling through Jerusalem after it was destroyed, and he wondered how this will be brought back to life. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him to sleep for 100 years, or he died for 100 years, because the word فَأَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ مِيَةَ عَامٍ. Then he was put to die for 100 years. ثُمَّ بَعَثَهُ, and then he was resurrected back, he was brought back, and then he was asked, كَمْ لَبِثْ, how long did you stay in that state? And he said, probably a day, or maybe part of the day. And then he was told, بَلْ لَبِثْتَ مِيَةَ عَامٍ, no, you were gone for 100 years. فانظر إلى طعامك وشرابك لم يتسنه, look at your food, nothing happened to it. But وانظر إلى حمارك, but look at your donkey, that how your donkey is turned to dust, nothing of the donkey remains. وَلِنَجْعَلَكَ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ, and this will be a sign for the people. وَانظُرْ إِلَى الْعِظَامِ كَيْفَ نُنْشِزُهَا ثُمَّ نَكْسُوهَا لَحْمًا, look at this donkey's remain, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put, look at the bones of the donkey, how we bring them together, and then we clothe them with the flesh. So when the sign was made clear to him, that he saw an entire donkey coming back to life, and was exactly the way it was when he, like 100 years ago. So again, we see another example of an animal coming back to life after being dead and the soul being put into it. And then we also know in the books of hadith that on the day of judgment, all the animals that have ever lived shall be brought back to life. And then if any animal has committed any injustice against any other animal, that injustice is punishable. So that decision will also take place on the day of judgment, even between the animals. Subhanallah. And then after the decision is done, the judgment call is over between the animals, because they are not from the al-mukallafeen. They will not be the one who will have the Q&A session to go to hellfire or go in the Jannah. So then they will all be turned to dust. And then upon seeing that, the kuffar will say, وَيَقُولُ الْكَافِرُ يَا لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ تُرَابًا. And then upon seeing that, the kafir will say, the kuffar will say, the disbelievers will say that, oh, I'm destined to go into hell. I wish I could also be turned to dust, just like that. So I would cease to exist, so I would not have to enter in the hellfire. So this is about the animals, and these are the two stories that are being mentioned also in the books that talk about the life of Barzakh. And as I mentioned to you, that Imam Suyuti rahimahullah mentions it in his book of tafsir. And there is another ayah which is in Surah Luqman, ayah number 28, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا خَلْقُكُمْ وَلَا بَعْثُكُمْ إِلَّا كَنَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. The creation and resurrection of you, the process of creating you and process of bringing you back to life, all is as simple for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All is as simple for Him as that of a single soul. Single soul. Subhanallah, subhanallah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala closes the ayah of Surah Luqman, ayah number 28, by saying, Inna Allah sami'un basir. Surely Allah is all hearing and all seeing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us. Now people have been asking that, okay, will I be able to get my pet in Jannah or not? Well, in the Quran, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Those who will go in the Jannah, they can ask for things, right? Whatever their heart will desire. And their heart will not desire for anything that is not according to the status of Jannah. Just remember, their heart will only desire things that meet the criteria of Jannah. So, if your pet meets the criteria of Jannah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you your pet back. Or may give you a pet exactly like yours, or may create a pet in Jannah for you and bring the soul of that pet in that pet, bring the soul of your pet into that pet that is created in Jannah. Allah knows best, but we all hope for the best, that believers, when they are successful and they are in Jannah, they are in the mercy and blessing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell them that I will never ever be upset with you, and there is nothing that you will have that will be taken away from you. Rather, you will only experience increments. And one more point, We do not exactly know where these souls of animals live. So we do not have much idea about their barzakh. But we know that one day, on the day of Qiyamah, their bodies will also be brought back to life, and their souls will then be put back into those bodies. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those people who are entered Jannatul Firdaus without any question and answer. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.